My story this week is about a best friend who became an axe murderer and is now a family therapist.
Oh, hold on. This is not real. She is not a therapist.
So real. So let's get into it. Hey, lie detectors. I'm Melissa,
And I'm Jamie.
and this is Lipstick and Lies. Jamie, so I saw on Instagram that you were in a beautiful area on a boat with friends. Tell me about your weekend.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so we were in Lake Havasu, which is in Arizona. I kind of grew up going to this lake because I'm from the Inland Empire, which is anyway, everybody from the Inland Empire goes to Havasu, but my uncle has a house there. And so my two cousins, which are more like sisters, like we
They
all
look like your sisters, like they could be
uh
your sisters.
a
I
lot of
definitely
people say
saw the
that.
relation, I definitely did.
Yeah, the genes run pretty strong on my mom's side. But yeah, there we, either every weekend I would be spending the night at their house as a kid or vice versa. They'd be at our house. And so me and Steve were really looking forward to it because we also didn't bring any kids. So it was just an adult weekend and we took full advantage. And it's just my uncle's so much fun. My cousins, like I literally did hit the lotto with my family. So I had an absolute blast and can't wait. We're already planning the next trip.
You know, sometimes when I look at your Instagram, I think my life is kinda boring because
Uh,
because 'cause you're constantly, like, RVing, on a boat, on a motorcycle, I don't know, you're always outside having a blast with your family.
I that's so funny that you say that because I feel like my life is so boring. And me and Steve do stay home a lot. Like we're not like go out people like all the time we used to be. But I think that now that the weather has gotten better, like we're just jam packed. Every weekend we have something. So it's a little bit deceiving, probably looking at my Instagram right now, because when the weather's not as good, which let's face it, in Southern California, it's always pretty good, but we're spoiled. And so, like, if there's like a cloud in the sky, we're like, oh, we're staying home. But now that the
But
weather's nice, we're out a lot. So,
and you live in California,
yeah, so it's been
so the
nice.
weather is always nice.
Yeah. Well, how was your weekend? Aren't you planning you're planning a Mexico trip, I know that. And then also your
Yeah,
son is graduating and you're
yeah.
hosting the party at your place, right?
Yeah, so we're leaving this week to Mexico.
Oh,
One thing that I wanna do for my kids and have been able to do, thankfully, is I wanted to give them international travel. So I grew up
mm,
really poor, and that's not an option when you're on welfare is to travel internationally. Even for the school functions, high school trips and so forth, they require you to spend the money. I remember being envious of all of my classmates that would get to do the end of the year senior trip. Did you have
yes.
that?
We did have that. Now, I was effing off in high school by that time, so I did not attend. I was like so checked out and I barely graduated. It's a long story, but I was just partying too much. But I do remember like being younger, to your point, not
Mhm.
having enough money to go on like certain trips that other kids got to go on as well. And it's traumatizing. And that's a strong word. And I don't know if you feel that same way too, but it's like this feeling of shame, like you're different from the other kids because they're all going on this trip and you obviously can't afford it. So you're
Yeah.
not, that's why you're not there. So
Yeah, and then everybody asks you, "Are you going on the trip? Are you" and what do you say? "Oh, sorry, I
can't
can't
afford
afford"
it.
even though the trip is looking back, it wasn't extremely expensive. They the schools and I think it's a third party that hosts these, if I remember right. I mean, this I graduated in '98, so that's a long time ago.
Well, I graduated in 96, bitch.
Okay, okay. So,
I'm just kidding.
looking back no, looking back, I think it was a third party,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
came I don't think it was hosted by the school, but a third party, and, you fill out the forms, and I think the cost was relatively under $1,000 or something back in the '90s, I don't know. But anyway, my point is that I wanted to give my children the experience of leaving the United States and seeing the world, at least one other country before they graduate high school, and that was always my goal. And so for my daughter, when she turned 16, I took her to Paris,
Wow.
And
Cool.
the rule is, by the way, the rule is the kids get to pick where they wanna go. So my daughter
Oh my.
picked yeah, so my daughter picked Paris, and my son picked Mexico City.
How
And yeah.
cool.
Yeah,
Aw.
and so this is a bucket list trip for him. It's jam-packed and everything he wants to do, so I'm excited to chaperone his bucket list trip.
That is that gives me goosebumps because I know that's a really proud feeling for you to be able to
Mhm.
do the things for your kids that your parents were not able to do for you. And so how cool the trip has extra meaning, you know?
Yeah. Well, speaking of parents, I'll bring us back into the show topic of So I Married an Axe Murderer.
Oh my
Uh,
gosh. I'm
you're like,
still
"How is this gonna segue?" It's gonna be weird. It's gonna
I
be
c-
weird.
okay, the
Okay.
weirder the better.
Okay. Okay, so my husband, Steve, and I grew up together, and I wanna say it was early '90s, like, I just gave, my graduation date of '98, so I
Yeah.
think this had to be, like, I don't know, s early night like, 92, 93, something like that. Well, it was definitely before '95 because my father was arrested in '95. So, my dad would take me to the coast every summer to go visit Steve and his folks, because my dad was friends with Steve's dad. He went to high school with his dad.
Okay.
And on this summer trip, Steve and I discovered that we like each other, that I thought he was super hot and he liked me. And so we asked my dad to go to the movies. And my dad picks the movie and he picks So I Married an Axe Murderer.
No. Okay, hold on. And for people who don't know your story, this like has some maybe some
Okay,
extra
I can
meaning.
laugh
I don't know.
yeah, I
Yes,
can
yeah.
laugh about it now, but in the meantime like, in that moment, you know, my dad's chaperoning Steve and I, and we're watching So I Married an Axe Murderer, and at that time, I did not know my dad was leading a double life. Obviously, my dad was an axe murderer, but for those who don't know, he's in prison now serving multiple life sentences for the murders of 8 women, and he's known as the happy face serial killer. And he was living that double life the same time frame that he had taken Steve and I to this movie. So, I don't know, read into it as you will,
Right.
but I think it was kind of
Foreshadowing or
yeah,
bizarre at the
foreshadow
very least, you
yeah.
know?
Yeah, bizarre at the very least. So
And can I just say really quick, what's interesting is that when you and I met, um, I didn't know you. You didn't know me. I had never looked you up or anything, but I knew your voice because I had listened to your podcast, the Happy Face Killer podcast. And I just
mhm,
thought it was like so incredible. So you and I just ended up at this same event by chance. And I went up to like shake your hand and just say, hey, now that I know who you are, you're the host of that podcast. Great work. I'm a fan of your and then you and I, created a friendship after that. So
mhm.
I had listened to your podcast. So for anybody who has not listened, to the Happy Face Killer podcast. It's excellent. Riveting, riveting storytelling.
I think that, people have a hard time finding it now because there's a season 2 and it was Happy Face presents Two Face, and it's all under the same feed. So season 1 is under that same title. I don't know why they do that. But, anywho, it was quite a journey, and that was 2018 when I did that, and I met with Don Finley, who is the, son of my dad's last victim, Julie Winningham. That was his mother. That was a very emotional moment. Up until that point, I really haven't, shared much with people, that intimately, about what it was like to live that experience and what it was like in the aftermath. And one thing that has propelled me though is I'm very, very focused on the victims and making sure that they get to share their story and that I don't share it because it's not my story. And so it makes it difficult to share my story, for context because
You're also
eh,
sharing their story in some sense
exactly.
because you almost have to. And not to derail too much, but it brings up an interesting conversation because I know there's a big movement, ethics in true crime, which I am totally behind, and victims deserve to be highlighted and their families and things like that. But it gets a little complicated when we start thinking about people like you. I see you also as a survivor. I don't know if you like the word victim, but you were in my eyes, a victim of your
Yeah.
father's actions, and that was not at all easy for you. And so there's this thing of like, you also deserve to tell your story, and you shouldn't feel ashamed because I understand that you're not the one who died or had a family member who died, but you certainly were a victim of your father's actions and you did not ask for that. And you should be able to tell your story. But I know it's probably hard for you for many reasons. It's very complicated.
Yeah, it's more about, I don't mind sharing my story. It's easier now than it's ever been, but what's difficult is the way to tell my story. So I respect the victims, that they lost the family members that lost their loved ones to my
Hmm.
father. Um, because I never want to seem flippant, or not compassionate, because that's not the case at all. I'm truly sorry for what my father has done to them and their families and their loved ones. I mean, there's nothing I can do. And I had to deal with a weird kind of reverse, I don't know what you would call it, survivor's guilt in a way,
Hmm.
because for a long time I felt like I couldn't be happy because my dad was a happy face serial killer. So
Uh,
that would look that I was just not respectful
yeah.
of what my
You know,
father's actions were,
you're,
you know?
and I never would have thought of that, but you're somebody who probably for the rest of your life has to sort of like second guess how you're going to behave in certain situations, what you're going to say, and you have to be careful. Like, and that's it sucks. Because you
Mhm.
shouldn't have to feel that way. You should not. You did nothing wrong. You did not ask for this. If you could reverse it all, I'm sure you would. But I think for the rest of your life, because this happened and that survivor's guilt, and because it was your father, um, you have to second guess like everything you do because of how people might perceive you. And I'm sorry you have
Absolutely.
to do that. Yeah, yeah,
Well,
that's got to be hard.
honestly, Jamie, this podcast for me is a rebellion against my comfort because I didn't feel that I could share that I've been really fascinated by female perpetrators. And this podcast gives me a place to have that conversation that I always wanted to have. But I always thought, oh, what are people going to think? Um, that, I'm like my father, the apple doesn't fall far from the tree because I'm interested in true crime.
You and
Um,
almost every other woman that
Everybody.
I know and person.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, that they
Yeah.
shouldn't read too much into that at all. But I see
Well,
what you're saying.
that was like the little voice in your head, the critic in your head, that was a critic, and it was stopping me from really exploring it for a while, but I always wanted to because with my father and other serial killers, they they're more cookie cutters. Their motivations, their desires for why they kill is about power and control. And women, it's so much more varied. And that's what I find the interesting part,
Yes,
you
me
know.
too.
And I really enjoy meeting storytellers that tell women's stories that don't paint them into, brushstroke them into this box like, oh, she's evil, or she's good. The Madonna complex, all of that. So
Yeah.
there's one producer that I absolutely admire, and one day I hope to meet him. He's on my bucket list. His name is David E. Kelly. Do you know who he is?
I've heard the name.
Okay. So this is what led me into wanting to do the show that I'm going to talk about today, which is Love and Death. It's on HBO. Have you heard about that series?
No.
Well, it could be confusing because there's two shows. There's
Okay.
on Hulu, there's Candy, and on HBO, it's Love and Death. and it
Oh,
covers the same case
hold on.
of Candy Montgomery.
My mind just exploded. I don't know why I didn't put the pieces together. I have watched Candy, and first of all, wow. Excellent, excellent series on Hulu, I will say. I don't think I've watched what it is that you're talking about on HBO.
Yeah, Love
Um
and Death. Mhm.
okay,
All
okay.
right, so
Yes,
I got a
Candy.
little
Okay.
okay, I
Yes.
got a little bit of tea about how this happened. Like, in the TV world, as you know, I'm an executive producer. This is what I do now for my work is I make documentaries. And it's rare that what would happen is that you have a scripted series, which is, by the way, multi-millions of dollars to produce. I mean, we're talking over 10 million. Like, we're talking over 50 million.
Mind blowing, but I guess
Okay.
these actors have to get paid and,
Oh, and they get paid some serious cash.
I imagine.
Most famous actors get paid over 1,000,000 an episode,
Ugh,
plus residuals. I don't know how the deals work with the streamers
sure.
because if they just give them a one-time fee and they own the IP, I'm not quite sure about how they get paid, but the tea is so I had to look this up
Spill the tea. Oh my god,
because
I'm so excited.
and here's the context. So when I say it's over $50 million to produce a scripted series, it's an investment for these streamers. Like that's not small change. So normally there's research if there's anything going to be in the marketplace that's competing. So the fact that Candy and Love and Death came out around the same time piqued my interest. So I started looking it up. And here's what happened. So I found the Wrap article, and it says that the creative team behind Love and Death learned about the Hulu filming 2 months into filming their series.
Oh.
So here is David Kelly. He says, this is a quote in the Wrap. We thought, and actually we were the first out of the gate with a mini series, so we didn't know the other project was coming into being, Kelly told the Wrap. If you had asked me, would we have done it knowing that someone else was doing it first? That probably would have given me pause, but my answer at the end of the day would still be yes, because I think the projects are very different. It also goes into stating that the Wrap wrote, after Kelly and director Leslie Glatter were separately sent John Bloom's Texas Monthly reporting on the case and the book Evidence of Love, a true story of passion and death in the suburbs, both of which team owns the rights to, the collaboration bloomed. The pair found out about Candy 2 months into filming. So basically, what happened is that HBO's team, creative team, bought the rights, the releases to the intellectual property that was the Texas Monthly articles that and then the book. So
Okay.
that's right. That's what you're supposed to do. So it makes me wonder what's Hulu's Candy based off of?
That is such a great question. I had no idea of any of this tea, like behind the scenes tea. I watched the Hulu thing. I've never even heard of the HBO one until you just mentioned it. And of course, now I'm going to go watch it and see how different it is.
Well, I'm
But
glad you saw it because we can have different notes then about the
yeah,
story. Okay.
yeah, yeah.
So here are the two actresses for one for Hulu and one for HBO. Notice the one big difference?
The hair is just so off on the actress with the shoulder length hair. Like, that's not what Kendi's hair looked like, right? In
Well,
real life?
this is what she looked like in real life.
Oh, yeah. She had the helmet perm
The helmet perm.
with the big
So,
glasses.
you know what made me think of? So when, you see this with the blowout for Candy, HBO's version of Candy, it makes me think that they wanted Candy to be a more
Hotter.
hotter and a more
Yeah.
sympathetic character.
Uh-huh.
I
Yes,
mean,
because Jessica Biel, that was the thing that when I was watching the Hulu doc, it's like this lady has sex appeal and she's definitely like horny for dudes.
oh,
Like
yeah.
I don't know how else to put it, but like she has hair like that.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
the hair is not super desirable, but she rocked it.
Mhm. So, yes, that was the real Candy. So, here is the story. of Candy Montgomery.
Cannot wait.
So for this episode, I watched HBO's Love and Death. The full story of Betty's murder and Candy's subsequent acquittal was featured in Texas Monthly as a two-part series in 1984. And now, as we know, there are two scripted limited series on Hulu and HBO. Let me tell you about the real Candy. Because when I started watching Love and Death, I actually did not know that this was based on a true story.
Oh,
Yeah.
interesting. I can't remember. Actually, I can't remember if I knew it was based on a true story or not when I watched the Hulu thing.
Mhm.
I don't know because I don't remember hearing about this case before the Hulu doc. I don't think.
Yeah, I started watching it. Well, my intention, funny enough, the irony of this is that I thought, "Oh, I'm going to start opening my mind to watching scripted shows so that I could get inspiration for the documentaries that I make." And I just started watching Love and Death, and I'm like, "This is so crazy." And then it pops up based on a true story. And I'm like, "You're kidding me."
Yeah, because it's wild. And the piece that you told me in the beginning of how it all ended up, I don't know why I was not aware of that. So I'm very curious to see how she went from axe killer to therapist.
Yes, and we're gonna get there.
This
We're
is
gonna get
so
there.
crazy.
This story starts in 1977. What year were you born, Jamie?
78, the year after.
Okay, I was born in 79. So the center of Candy Montgomery's universe was this tiny town in Wiley, Texas. The center of it was this church that she was very outgoing and running the board. She was like one of those ladies at church that is in charge of all the bake sales.
Yeah.
She's
I
your
can
gal.
totally picture this woman just
Mhm.
handling it all. Everybody knows her. She's involved in every single thing. Hey guys, how's it going? Yeah, got your cookies? Okay, Martha, you got the muffins? Okay.
Yep, that's her. This is her. Candy Montgomery and Betty Gore first met during church service at the Methodist Church of Lucas in Wiley, Texas. Both housewives, their families became close. Their daughters became friends, often having sleepovers. So, if your whole world is the church, then everybody knows you. Everybody kind of knows the surface level you, I would think. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm sure there's a few friends in the series Love and Death, they paint a picture that Candy's close friend was the female pastor, which I thought
Mm.
was kind of progressive in the 70s. I didn't know I grew up Catholic, so I didn't see any female pastors, but I thought, "Oh, that's cool."
Yeah, that does. I mean, still to this day, I think it's not nearly as common. I mean, most pastors that I think I know of or see or hear of are men. So yeah,
So,
certainly progressive. I think for the 70s
yeah, and I'm
and
not
in
quite.
Texas. I'm sorry to cut you off, but like and
Oh,
in
no.
Texas, right?
Right.
Like I don't know.
So, Love and Death show that the first friendship that Candy has is the female pastor who got a job as a professor far away. Like for I think it's like a couple hour drive someplace in Texas. You'll have to forgive me, I don't remember the name, but doesn't matter. Her main friend leaves. She has this other friend that is more of her confidant that she tells all of her juicy secrets to. And Betty in Love and Death, and mind you, this is how it's portrayed on the show. I don't know if this is real life.
Right.
Betty is one of those women that has extreme anxiety, and they paint her character as one that is very needy. Like, she
Mm-hmm.
needs to feel comforted all the time, that she doesn't let her husband travel because she doesn't wanna be alone.
They did the same in the Hulu doc. They kind of painted her as a little bit like meager, a little bit socially awkward, doesn't have much to say. And I think she was very dependent on her husband too. Like you said, didn't want him to go out of town. So they did the same at the Hulu doc.
So then they paint Candy's life. They start showing that Candy started contemplating cheating on her husband, Pat Montgomery, who's an electrical engineer. When I was reading more about Pat just online, it looks like he's kind of one of those guys that has a dry sense of humor, makes really good money. Back in that time period, he was making $70,000 a year,
Yeah.
which in the '70s,
Oh, yeah, great
that's an
living.
incredible income,
Yeah.
especially in Texas, in
Oh,
small
yeah.
town Texas.
Yeah.
So Pat provided Candy everything she needed thanks to his job as an electrical engineer at Texas Instruments. She was able to stay at home with their son and daughter, and while she didn't mind being a housewife, she was admittedly very bored with it.
Yeah, that's kind of like the sense that I get too, like from the Hulu doc, of course, just kind of like she needed more, but she seemed very social too. So needed to be
Yeah,
out, like
s
talking to people.
so it was more than church. She needed more than her church, her social life, and so Candy said, "I want fireworks." So
Meaning sex
mhm,
fireworks? Like
maybe.
in the
I'm
love
thinking
life?
so.
Like,
I'm
yeah, that's
thinking
how
so.
I'm reading it.
In Love and Death, it paints a picture that her husband comes home from work and sits in front of the TV. She tries to cuddle and start a conversation, but he's more interested in the comedy that he's watching and really takes Candy for granted. That's the picture. He provides everything. He might be one of those guys that thinks that he does his job as a partner by going to work, providing all the money, and therefore,
That's it.
"I did
Job
it.
done. When I come
Check."
home, I don't owe you a conversation. I don't owe you intimacy. I don't owe you. And I'm speaking for him, but I'm kind of like painting a picture of like, to your point, that he's just kind of feels like, well, I'm doing my job. Clearly, I'm providing a very good lifestyle for you. That's it. But like, it
Yeah, aren't
wasn't
you
enough for
happy?
her.
Yeah, aren't
Yeah.
you happy you have everything you could ever want? One thing that they do have in this small town or nearby this small town is a Target.
Oh, love a Target.
I was
Love a
actually
Target.
really excited for the scene where she's driving to Target. I'm like, "What did the old Target sign look like in the '70s? Was it the
Yeah.
same thing?"
It's so weird because I don't think I remember Target existing when I was a kid. Maybe it did, but we didn't go there. We went to Gemco. Okay. I don't know if you know what Gemco is, if that's
No,
just
we
like an
went to
Inland Empire.
Kmart and
Oh,
Shopko.
we went to
Kmart and
Kmart too.
Shopko, and then my mom would put our winter coats on layaway at
Yes, we did
Kmart.
layaway. Oh,
Mhm.
we did layaway at Mervyn's, at
Oh, I
Kmart,
forgot
and
about Mervyn's.
Gemco. Remember
All of these stores do not exist but Target.
I wonder why. I wonder why. Yeah,
It was the
Target's
it was the
amazing.
layaway. They weren't making much money off the layaway.
Well, yeah, and Target's moved to Starbucks inside the store. It's like, bro, this I will go there even if I don't
Oh
need
my god.
anything.
I have
Get
a
my
funny
latte
story
and
for
just
you.
yeah, tell me.
Okay. When I first started since I brought up Steve at the beginning of the episode, I'll bring up this story because it's kind of embarrassing. So, when we were dating and I lived in Santa Clarita, like, by
Where
where
I live
where
now.
you
Yeah.
live
Yeah.
now, that Target is a premium Target. I don't
It's a good one.
ladies, can we just agree that not all Targets are the same?
They are not the same. Because I just
No.
went to one over the weekend because we were at a car show and it was not my Target. Not my
No.
Target,
No,
honey.
because you
Mm-mm.
have the best Target in the world in
It's a
Santa
good one.
Clarita. So if you're in Santa Clarita and you go to what, Six Flags? Or no, Magic Mountain,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah, Six Flags Magic Mountain.
Yeah, if you go to Magic Mountain, you have to make a stop at Target and check out what the best Target in the world is like because
Absolutely.
that was my place, but it was also my place for another reason. So I've never been a regular girl.
That's what I love about you.
I go to
Oh
Target, and
God.
the minute I step in a Target, I have to go poo. And I don't know why. I have not been able to figure that out, but it's my, like I don't know if it's, like, my anxiety all of a sudden, like, relaxes. I
So
have no
you
idea.
always get the urge when you step into a Target.
Always. And my kids know it, and so they thought it was funny, and so I started noticing this pattern, and so I text my daughter, "I'm in Target," and then I put "I'm ready to do my my poo."
Little do they know.
I did not text it to my daughter, I texted it to Steve. Who is
Oh
like
my.
we're like, I don't know, just a couple dates. I mean, we grew up
No,
together.
it was new in your relationship.
new in our
Oh,
relationship
that's
because
awful. Oh my
while
god.
we grew up together, we had a major, 20 years plus, this big span of time that we didn't communicate with each other and we had no relationship. So he's like a legit new boyfriend.
Sure. Yeah,
That
because
I, yeah.
because your relationship, the first one was as teenagers.
Hmm.
Then you went off, you got married. I believe he got married, and you didn't
Yeah.
see or really talk to each other during that span of a couple decades. And then now all of a sudden you're reintroduced to each other as adults. And here you are in your new relationship, and you have to take a poop.
Yeah, and I remember the text, I'm like, "I'm at Target," the emoji with the
The
little
poop.
bullseye, and
Ah!
then I'm like, "So it's time for my regular," and then the shit emojis, like, "Beep, beep, 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 beep." So,
I'm already trying to think of like a lie you could spin and be like, "Oh, yeah, no, it's an
he
inside joke," or "I have my dog with me, and my dog is the one who has to poop every time we go to Target."
well,
I don't
just to give
know.
you, I guess, some context, so when I was dating Steve, I would go to his house and his bathroom was like, it didn't feel very insulated, so if you had a
Oh, it's
fart
the
or, like,
worst.
anything, you could hear the noises in the rest of
Oh
the house,
no,
so I'd
no.
always turn the fan on or
Get a
some, like,
pillow and put it on
water.
your butt.
But his son called me out because there's a second bathroom, it was the kids' bathroom on the other side of the house, so I would always go to the kids' bathroom if I had to toot.
Right.
And so his son's like, "Why do you use our bathroom?" In front of his dad. I'm like,
Oh, that's
"Oh, I don't
awful.
know."
My god, you're like, "Listen, son,
Okay.
listen."
Yeah.
Okay, can I just tell you really quick? It is I you it's so funny that you have like I don't know why it, brings up you have to poop every time you go to Target, which is like so funny. But me and Steve, when we go to Target, which is rare because I usually go grocery shopping by myself because he wants nothing to do with it. But every now and then he'll come with me. We went to Target and my husband thinks he's so freaking funny and he likes to fuck with me in public to embarrass me. Like my dad used to do this to my mom too. Like she would bend over in the grocery store and he would make a fart noise and be like, "Terry," and she's like, "You fucking ass!" Like she was gonna murder his ass because my mom is like very like private with that stuff.
Mhm.
Anyway, me and Steve, every time we freaking go to Target, he does the same damn thing. And I'll be checking out, we'll be paying, and he'll right in front of the cashier, he's like, "Oh, babe, do you still have the bubble guts? Because they have the bathroom right over here." I am like, "You fucking asshole." Like, he just thinks he's so funny. He wants to accuse me of having bubble guts, like I have diarrhea.
I've never heard of bubble guts.
Oh, that's what he calls it, bubble guts. He's like, "Babe, you still got the bubble guts? They got the bathroom right over here." And I always have to just like make excuses. I'm like, "You can ignore him, please." I'm like, "He thinks he's funny. He's not. I don't have bubble guts." The lady's probably like, "Sure."
Mhm. Mhm.
Anyway, that's my
Well,
Target shit story.
this show is sponsored by BetterHelp.
Melissa, do you ever lay in bed at night stressing on every minute that passes because you know you need sleep, but your brain just won't turn off?
Yeah, I totally relate to that. And the more I think about the sleep I need to get, the more racing thoughts about work, life, deadlines enter my brain and prevent me from falling asleep.
Same. And I think that's where BetterHelp comes into play. BetterHelp can be such a great resource to release those racing thoughts with a therapist before they enter our minds and keep us awake at night.
Right, because releasing negative thoughts to a licensed therapist instead of having them fill your brain to the point that you can't sleep or even function properly is like working for yourself instead of against yourself.
Exactly. And to your point, Melissa, if I'm getting better sleep, I am definitely going to be a better version of myself. And everyone around me will be forever grateful for that. But seriously, therapy provides positive coping skills and how to set boundaries. And who wouldn't benefit from that?
I'm feeling slightly attacked right now because I clearly need to set boundaries instead of being a yes person who doesn't want to disappoint anyone.
I'm definitely not calling you out for that because I also tend to overcommit to things and regret it later. Clearly, we both could benefit from a session or two with one of BetterHelp's licensed therapists.
Agreed. And here's the thing, we could even get therapy in our jammies because BetterHelp is all online, so we don't even have to leave the house.
It's the therapy in our jammies part for me. I love that BetterHelp could not be easier to use. Just fill out a brief questionnaire and BetterHelp matches you with a licensed therapist.
Right. And there's no charge if you decide to switch therapists at any time.
Make your brain your friend with BetterHelp.
Visit betterhelp.com/LL today to get 10% off your first month.
That's betterhelp.com/LL.
Well, apparently this Target didn't give Candy fireworks. Any
It
kind
gave
of
you Target gave you fireworks though
yeah.
in
Miralax.
another way. Oh my god, I'm dying.
It was like
Okay.
yeah. So, back then, the 28-year-old started thinking about Alan, Betty's husband, when Candy collided with Alan Gore, while playing a church volleyball game. So, the scene on Love and Death is they're playing volleyball, and he rams into her, she falls, he takes his hand and pulls her up, and according to, to the real Candy, that it was an innocent moment, but she thought he smelt sexy.
Okay, so she was turned on by Betty, her shy, meager church friend's husband
Mhm.
at a volleyball game. Okay, trying to paint the scene here. Okay, but
Yeah.
she's looking for it. So it sounds like she's looking for it. So like any little thing probably would have got her going, it seems like. Because she was looking for it, maybe.
Yeah, Alan may not have come across the obvious choice to embark on an affair with. He had a receding hairline and potbelly, but they had similar outgoing personalities.
Okay.
Okay, so I'm
Well,
gonna show you a picture of Alan,
so this is Alan Gore. His name's
uh,
Alan, right?
Alan Gore and his wife, Betty Gore. And I honestly thought, is he related to the Gore that ran for
Al
president?
Gore.
Al Gore? Yeah, I had to look it up, but he's
Well,
not.
okay, so he's not. That would have been a very interesting fact.
Yeah.
I would describe him as just your average vanilla white guy that looks like he works as an accountant
Yeah.
somewhere,
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay.
Yeah.
Then I
Not
could take
not homely, but not hot by any means.
yeah, and Betty the same. I mean, she's not they're both I would say average.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say
Not
they're both totally average.
yeah. Going back to Miss Candy, Candy also sensed that he was flirting with her. She came on to him a few weeks after they collided at that volleyball game. She slipped into the passenger side of his car after church choir practice and told him that she was attracted to him. Then she got out.
Oh my
That's really
gosh,
bold.
that's very, very bold. I mean, that could go so all kinds of wrong for her, and it could be humiliating. But that tells me that she really was wanting something. Like
Mhm.
she was wanting something outside of her marriage that she wasn't getting in her marriage, and she was like acting very boldly to get it. I mean, she wanted it.
But I'm surprised that she had the confidence that he wouldn't share that with his wife. I mean, I have a relationship with my husband that the other day he came home and told me about this female that had asked him for advice. And I was like, "Oh, that's such a compliment." But, you know,
But it's a little like, huh, what kind of advice?
yeah. Well, he told me a couple more details. First of all, I wanted to make sure that my husband knew that I did see it as a compliment, but
Yeah,
also girl to girl.
yeah.
Like, why are you
Huh.
asking my husband for advice?
Yeah, and it's like, "Ooh, what kind of advice?" Yeah, it's that kind of thing where it could be totally innocent, it could be
Mhm.
nothing,
Could be, could
but
be,
it could be something.
but it could
But,
be something. But,
when
I
you
mean, you
say
trust your
that
husband,
yes,
I have to trust my husband, and I do trust my husband, but the fact that he brought that up to me
well, he came and told you about
yeah,
it,
yeah,
so he was open about it. Well, going back to what you said about Candy being bold enough to get into this guy's car, Alan Gore, not Al Gore, Alan Gore,
I know,
and
now I'm
ask
gonna
him
slip
for an
you up.
affair, or yeah, or say like, "Hey, I'm attracted to you," and you're saying like found it interesting that she wasn't afraid that he was going to go home and tell his wife. I am getting the impression that Candy's an alpha and Betty Gore is a beta. And so an alpha is not really worried. They're going to be very dismissive of the beta female. And they're going to be like, well, I don't give a shit if she finds out because what's she going to do? Like,
Mhm.
I have no idea if that was the case, but I kind of get the sense that Candy's like, I could give two shits what Betty's going to do if she finds, she's not going to, what's Betty going to do? you
Well,
know?
one thing that when I was watching Love and Death, that was striking to me is how much I related to Candy as a character,
Mm.
and that started to make me nervous because
Okay, well, in
I
what ways? Because that's interesting.
yeah, because she's not content, and
Uh-huh.
I I know my flaws, and I'm not a content person. I always wanna be doing more, I get bored easily, I have multiple projects running, if I was in Wiley, Texas, I would probably want an affair too. I don't know,
Yeah.
like, I need
You would
some
be somebody who'd be
stimuli, a
bored.
little
Yeah,
yeah, I
you would
want
need
some
more.
adventure, something edgy. I don't know if I would say that I would like, it depends on the relationship you're in.
Yeah,
Like, let me
exactly.
backtrack. I don't know if I would have an affair,
I
but,
know what you're saying though. Like you just what you can kind of understand she was a big fit, maybe like kind of a big fish in a small pond. She was just something who needed more out of life that she wasn't getting it in her professional life and her personal life in the area she was living in, this small little town with maybe not a lot going on. She needed fireworks. She said she needed fireworks. And so I can see where you would relate to her in that regard too. And I think that maybe now that you say that, like I can kind of relate to her in that
mhm,
sense as well because I get bored easily too. Like I live in Santa Clarita. I love it out here. It's a great place to raise kids, but I will shout from the mountaintops. I will have no business here once I am done raising my youngest child and they graduate from high school because it's like boring. I mean,
it
to me,
is.
I need
It's a
more.
bubble.
It's
It's
a
a bubble.
bubble, super safe, and schools are great. So, yeah, raise your family here, but then I'm out,
I mean,
you
there's a
know?
reason why they film Santa Clarita Diet in Santa Clarita
Yeah.
because nothing happens in Santa Clarita. It's the safest utopia of suburbia life. Like, it
Yeah.
was a excellent place to raise my children, and when my daughter graduated from high school, I left because it really is kind of like Groundhog Day every
It
day, like
is.
that movie where you get up, the sun shines,
Yeah.
it's good, it's beautiful, and you just go through the motions, you take the kids to school, but
Yeah.
there's a zen and a peace and a joy that is in that too.
Yeah.
So,
True.
I do miss that aspect of the Ho-Hummery has a very nice peaceful feel to it, of
It does.
safety,
It
of
does,
safety.
and we do get that here. We find ourselves traveling outside of Santa Clarita, though, anytime we want to go do something fun, which the cool thing is we live right by, like, all the LA beaches and all kind the mountains, the
Mhm.
desert. So, like, we can do a lot of we're near a lot of entertainment and beautiful places. But, yeah, I can kind of relate to Candy a bit in that sense as well.
So she had known Alan for only 9 months at this point, but it seemed much longer. He was a lot like her, active in the church, a lover of kids, the outgoing, personable half of a mismatched couple. Alan thought about Candy that entire week after she said, "Do you wanna have an affair?" I mean, could you not? I mean, how could he not think about it? He has to be, A, flattered,
Yeah.
but then his mind probably was going down that rabbit hole of,
What
what would that be?" Especially if
Yeah.
he's bored at work.
Yeah, and it sounds
Uh,
like he was bored at home as well.
yeah.
That's the way
So
they portrayed it in the Hulu doc is that, he didn't have the most lively of marriages, but who
in
knows?
Love and Death, it just shows him at a desk job, and he seemed like he was engaged at work and but removed from his home life from work. Like, when he's at work, he's at work. When he's at home, he's a good
At work.
father.
No, I'm
Yeah.
just kidding.
I know.
um,
There are some men who are at work and at
Still
work.
at work. Yeah. And
Yeah.
by the way, I want to preface my previous statement by saying that just because a man or a woman is like maybe not being fulfilled at home or bored or this, I'm not saying that that gives them an excuse to go out and like cheat because I am not of that mindset.
Right.
But I
Right.
guess we're trying to paint a picture and understand what was going on in their minds and their lives as they entered into what they were going to enter
Well,
into together.
affairs you're absolutely right, though. Affairs don't start off with happy people. I I would say that they may be happy people in some aspects of their lives, but there's something in them searching for something else.
Hmm.
Whether They're searching for who they used to be, and they lost a sense of their identity, or in Candy's case, she feels numb
Mhm.
and wants an adventure. I mean, there's lots of studies for why people have start an affair, but it's normally not about the other person, is what I've gathered from research. It's not about um, the affair partner, even per se. It's really about themselves.
Yeah, something that's going on with them
Hmm.
personally. Yeah, I would
Yeah.
agree with that.
So Alan had thought about Candy, and his wife, though, was pregnant with their second child. Yeah.
Now that complicates things. Like that's
Yeah.
awful,
Yeah.
Can you imagine? I've, had 3 children and I've been in a marriage, each time. I can't imagine being pregnant and having all those feelings and hormones and all this vulnerability and stuff and then like your partner cheating on you.
I
I
know.
can't imagine it.
So Betty was a teacher. Betty didn't enjoy her job. She hated being left alone when Alan had to travel for work. Their sex was routine and mechanical, which frustrated her husband. So, I mean, in Love and Death, the scene that is so cringe.
Oh no, here we
Oh my
go.
God, I got sucked into it and I joke with my husband because of the scene. The description from the Texas Monthly article, because I was curious about why the creative team chose this sex scene,
Oh.
for Love and Death, but here's
Ugh.
what the article said. She wanted the pregnancy plan down to the exact week so that the baby would be born in midsummer, and she wouldn't have to take any time off from teaching. I mean, this kinda tells you about her personality.
Yeah.
Like, it's about control, like, she
She's
needs to control
meticulous.
her life.
Yeah.
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 This was especially difficult since the Gore's sex life had dwindled to almost nothing. And when they did have sex, it was completely mechanical. Now, Alan was required to have clinical sex with Betty every night during her estimated fertility period in the name of family planning. He felt a little resentful. He had the distinct feeling he was being used. Could you imagine?
Okay, so they're painting it as like, okay, he's required. She's forcing him to have sex with her every single night so that she gets pregnant when she wants to. And like it's
Uh
her
huh.
controlling him. And oh, he has no choice in the matter. I don't know. I'm rolling my eyes. Now, I would agree. It does seem like Betty is a bit of a control freak and, meticulous about things and everything has to be controlled and planned. And I can see that how that would be exhausting to live with somebody like that. But also, it's like so funny that they're kind of painting her as what I do remember from the Hulu doc. They made it very easy to not like Betty. They made it easy to not like Betty, who was the victim. They made it easy to be like, oh, she's kind of a bitch or she's kind of controlling. She's kind of weird, and awkward.
Yeah, I thought the same thing. I think I could pull this scene up that I want to play for you. I have it. So this scene is they're in the bed, and it's classic missionary style.
Be sure to emit as you propulse forward. Evidently, that's helpful. Here, try to go deeper. I'm going as deep as I can. No, you've been deeper before. If you can squirt rather than drip, that helps too. Slower, deeper, and squirt.
Okay. All right. Okay. I am emotionally scarred. I am emotionally scarred. And thank you, Melissa. I will never be able to forget that scene. Okay, hold on. She was literally like, it was like she was instructing him deeper and the word squirt. Oh God, if you can
Instead,
squirt rather than drip, because she wants it to like shoot in her as if that's going to really get her pregnant, like, God dang it. That is so freaking cringe. Secondhand embarrassment all around. And
can you imagine the actors playing that scene?
no, I can't. Like, that's so freaking cringy.
Well, okay, this is how cringy it was. I was watching
Oh,
that scene, and my husband was playing his video game in the same area, but and he hears deeper. No, you've been deeper before. And then he turns around and he looks at the screen and then she's like, squirt.
It's
And
like,
my
what the
husband's
F
like, what
are
are you
you watching?
watching? It's research, babe. It's research.
Okay, hold on. I have to tell you something really quick. That reminds me of a time years ago when like Kim Kardashian's sex tape was like swirling around, the internet. It was like the biggest thing. I was sitting on the couch in the living room. Just looking through my phone, social media. My friend sends me a link and she's like, "Oh my God, you have to watch this or something." So I click on it and it's the sex tape. So of course I'm watching it, My husband comes walking in from the from the backyard. He's all, "What are you doing?"
Does he think you're watching porn?
Yeah. Like, it was like the middle of the day too. And he's like, okay. And first of all, he's probably like super excited, right? And I hate to burst your bubble, babe, but no, this is not me like sitting here like watching porn because I just love porn in the middle of the day. It was like I got a link and I'm like, yeah, of course I'm gonna watch, But like he was just like, what in the actual fuck did I just walk it on?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, ladies, if you want to turn your man off, say you've been deeper before and
I'm not gonna lie, Steve would actually be turned on by that.
no. No.
Sorry.
I dare you. I dare you. Because you owe him a payback for him saying the
Bubble guts.
the bubble guts. You can say when you're intimate, you can say, "All right, now squirt." I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
Don't
Are we
drip,
scarring?
you little
Are we?
bitch.
We're scarring. We're scarring folks right now. We're
I
scarring folks.
it's like so funny. I need a drink. Like it's 11 o'clock in the morning, but I need a cocktail right now.
I know. All right.
This
All right.
is
Back
so good.
to
Okay.
Candy. Yeah, back to
Okay.
Candy.
Okay,
Wait,
we're
so let me
serious now.
guess. Hulu did not have a scene like that.
Oh, honey, no. If they did, I would have totally, absolutely remembered it. They may have had one somewhat cringy, intimate scene between the two, but it's not memorable. So, no, certainly
Okay.
not that.
Okay.
Certainly not that.
So
Okay, HBO
the
wins.
difference between Hulu and HBO is the sex scenes.
Yeah, that is fuck
And
the
the hair.
hair. The hair, we don't give a shit. I've already forgotten about the difference in hair. It's the sex scene that is the dividing line between the two dogs.
It
Good.
is.
Bravo, HBO. Bravo.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So a week after Candy confessed to being attracted to them, they found themselves alone together following another volleyball game. This time, Alan sat in Candy's car in the church parking lot. And this is what was said. Candy said this to Alan, I believe, the first time. This is quoted, so I believe it's factual.
And this is when Candy first went into Alan's car.
Correct.
Okay, got it.
I want to talk to you sometime about something that's been bothering me. I've been thinking about you a lot and it's really bothering me, and I don't know whether I want you to do anything about it or not. Alan, a little confused, said nothing. I'm very attracted to you and I'm tired of thinking about it, and so I wanted to tell you. And with that, she jumped out of the car, slammed the door, and hurried across the parking lot. So I don't know what Alan said to Candy this time, though, when he goes into her car
Okay,
after a week of thinking about her proposition.
got it.
But it's quoted everywhere that Alan loves his wife Betty. And I it paints a scene that in Love and Death that while, she has her drawbacks, he finds that he's needed and that she can't really help herself. Like she's this way and that's just who
Mhm.
she is. So he told Candy that he loved Betty too much and he couldn't do that to his pregnant wife. He couldn't have an affair. So he's really wrestling it in his mind. However, about 2 or 3 weeks later, he called Candy on her 29th birthday and asked her to meet him at an auto repair shop in McKinney, Texas. The two discussed having an affair, both of them agreeing that they loved their respective spouses and didn't want to hurt them. They spent weeks going over logistics and establishing ground rules. If either of them started showing emotional attachment, they would stop seeing each other. So in Love and Death, they show this scene that they are meeting and they're having these platonic lunches to discuss having an affair and the pros and cons. But they're constantly meeting for lunch, but never pulling the trigger.
This is so like this sets their affair apart from a lot of affairs, I think. Like it's so like
Yes.
structured and planned out and like boundaries set for the it wasn't just like I see you, you see me and we're passionate. Like they're just like if we do this, here's how it's going to go down, here's the rules. Like it just was like very well executed and planned.
Well, I like that you brought that up because I feel like that sets their affair up differently than other affairs. And when we get to the murder, I feel like that also gives context into how this murder happened.
Mm.
But the fact that they didn't want to leave their spouses, they just wanted this rendezvous and it was just going to be sex, and that they didn't want feelings, that I mean they didn't want another person. A lot of murders happen because when with affairs involved, I should say, happen because they want to get rid of the other person,
Mhm.
to
Mhm.
get rid of them.
So that they can be with their
Their
mistress
lover.
or their
Yeah.
lover. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, but I didn't get the sense in the Love and Death, the way they portrayed it, as this was one out of, almost like an open marriage, but a one-sided open marriage.
Yeah.
So not really an
Very
open marriage,
one-sided.
never
Yeah.
mind, not an open marriage at all.
Ish. It's open marriage adjacent. I don't know.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, so a little bit about Betty and Alan pre-Candy coming into the picture. So from the Texas Monthly article, Betty Pomeroy had been one of those girls whose conventionality made her the frequent center of attention. I didn't get that vibe from Love and Death.
Weird.
She
No.
was pretty. She had an innocence about her and a wide Hollywood smile. I did not see that in
I
that
did not
picture.
get
I'm
that
like, are we talking
either.
about the same Betty?
Yeah, no. Are we talking about Betty Broderick or
Yeah. That had made her one of the most popular girls in her tiny hometown of Norwalk, Kansas.
I don't
I don't
see
know
her
where
as
that's at. Yeah, I don't see her as a Hollywood smile type. In
yeah.
college, Betty fell in love with her math teacher, and when she and Alan Gore decided to get married, her family and friends were surprised. They couldn't see what she saw in him. Alan was a small, plain man with horn rimmed glasses and puffy cheeks, and even at a young age, signs of a receding hairline. He was so shy, which made him come across as stern or aloof or even snobbish.
It like
So
sucks that his receding hairline is like such a prominent like hey, but he's got this receding hairline. He must be ugly as hell. Like, oh my
Alan,
god.
Alan, don't Google yourself.
Yeah. Totally. God, it's just like interesting because usually it's like women who get torn up like for their looks or picked apart. This guy Alan is really like his receding hairline is coming up a lot in a lot of these articles and the shows and the way
Yeah.
people talk about him. Her family was like, "But he's got a receding
Eh,
hairline. Surely you can't be attracted to this guy."
yeah.
God.
So basically, Jamie, I think we get the picture. Alan is not really hot.
Yeah, no, and
But
I
it's
would
never
agree.
about looks anyway. It's never
Right.
about looks
Right.
anyway.
Mhm.
And it so made me wonder, was Alan the pick for an affair because she couldn't did Candy think she couldn't fall in love with him because he wasn't
Oh,
that,
great point. Great
that
point.
attractive?
Yeah,
Like the safe
that
bet,
yeah,
you
because she
know?
knew that she would not catch feelings,
Mhm.
you know? Interesting.
I don't know. Food for thought. Candy and Alan started their affair at the Continental Inn on December 12th, 1978. He was an inexperienced lover.
Oh
I'm sorry.
no. Oh.
He was an inexperienced lover. Please, Ellen, don't read about yourself.
Bro, like God, this poor guy. He's got a receding hairline. He's a
That's what you
dripper, not a
get for having an
squirter.
affair.
Yeah.
You will be. You will have all of these articles write about how ugly and inadequate you are in bed. I'm
Poor
sorry.
Alan.
I know.
Oh.
He was an inexperienced lover who had never even had been French kissed before their encounter, but she thought he had promise.
Wait. Okay. Hold on. This is not making
Is it
sense. I mean, is he just like super
Well, remember all that mechanical sex they were
It's a
having.
lot of mechanical sex, and maybe Betty didn't direct him to French kiss her, so he couldn't.
Maybe, maybe. So one of the first sex scenes in Love and Death with Alan and Candy, it's definitely like they're kissing, they're more intimate, and then she goes to take a shower and she invites him to take a shower with her, and he's too shy to take a shower with her. I'm like, well,
Wait, you just had
you just
sex?
sex like
Yeah.
that's pretty intimate, but yeah, but he was too nervous to take a shower
You're a
with
little
her.
more exposed in the shower, I
Yeah,
guess.
that's
Who
probably
knows?
what it is. That's probably what
Right.
it is. They continued their affair for months, meeting at the cheaper Camo motel every other week, though the sex didn't get much better.
Oh God, Alan, you just can't catch a break, bud. You just can't catch a break.
Serves him right. It serves him right.
Damn
Um,
cheater.
While Candy felt guilty about deceiving her husband Pat, she never felt uncomfortable around Betty. She even threw her a baby shower.
Okay, this is reminding me a lot of the story I'm going to cover in the next episode. I am a little bit mind blown right now.
Yeah. Like,
Okay, a little
how
bit.
do you throw a baby shower for somebody and you're fucking their husband?
People do it, dude. It's
Apparently they
diabolical,
do.
but people do
They
it. It takes
do.
a special kind of person.
Yeah. Alan and Betty welcomed their second daughter, Bethany, in July of 1979. And while he continued his affair with Candy, their meetings were less frequent and lackluster.
Oh, God, shit. Can
He
Alan
also
do anything right?
No, he
Please
cannot.
tell me
He
he can
cannot.
hammer and please tell me he can hammer a nail. Please.
He also started feeling guilty leaving Betty home with their daughters, Alyssa and Bethany. Despite their agreement that there would be no emotional attachment, Candy would tell Ellen that she loved him.
Oh,
So, Love
hun.
and Death, by the way, I'm like,
Okay.
okay, so the scenes that started to make me not like Candy and not identify with Candy as much were the scenes where she started to do what every mistress does, which is tell me about your wife. Like, oh, Betty, she's not great at this, like giving a safe place for them to complain. Like, that's what they do. They commiserate with each other, you
Yeah,
know?
which elevates them. So it would elevate
Yeah.
Candy and maybe in Alan's mind think, well, yeah, clearly I'm so much better than your wife. I mean, she can't even do this for you and makes you miserable and she's so boring. Like it is very shitty. It's a very shitty mind fuck for the mistress, Candy to be doing that.
Yeah.
Um
Yeah. So, despite their agreement that there would be no emotional attachment, Candy would tell Ellen that she loved him. Betty noticed her husband's lack of interest in having sex with her and tried to seduce him one night, but he turned down her advances after being with Candy earlier in the day.
oh, and please don't tell me they have made a scene out of this. Please
They
do not.
did.
Oh,
They made a scene.
stop.
No, so the scene was actually very sad. The scene
Oh,
was
okay.
okay.
Okay. That is
So,
sad.
Betty doesn't initiate sex ever, and unless it's for fertility reasons, but this night they painted the picture. It had been a very long time since they were intimate, and
Mhm.
so she starts rubbing on his back and initiated sex, and he couldn't. And then the first time and the only time that she initiates sex, she's turned down and rejected. She is so burnt and hurt, and being rejected for sex is like very serious, I think, for females. I don't know how. I'm sure it's just as
It's
it's painful. I think it's painful.
humiliating.
It's
Yeah, that would be
humiliating.
humiliating, I think, for
Yeah.
anybody, but maybe especially women. But yeah, very humiliating, So that's sad that she tried in that moment and got shut down.
Yeah, because he was with Candy earlier.
Yeah.
His humiliated wife was convinced he didn't love her anymore and started to cry. In the following week, she began complaining about aches and pains and was prescribed painkillers that helped her nerves. So I think it
Mm.
shows you her the way she handles rejection or pain in her life is to control or to numb. I mean, which we all have our
Yeah, I think
vices.
we all have our
Yeah.
vices. Right, right,
Yep.
right.
Betty and Ellen's marital struggles led to led them to attending an immersive week-long marriage counseling at their church, which helped them understand each other better. Alan's new investment in his marriage led to him and Candy calling off their affair. So the scene in Love and Death is they go to this thing called Marriage Encounter, and everybody in the scripted series calls it a cult. This marriage encounter is a cult. But what they do is they give each other for the marriage encounter, they paint this very cheesy scene that they go into this almost like Renaissance hotel where it has knights in armor and it's like a fake castle. This is where
I s you lost me at Knights in Armor, Fake Castle. That's a cult, bitch. Like, no, I know. Babe, get me out of here. Like, I'm sorry. We'll work on our marriage elsewhere. No, thank
So
you.
they show up and they're kind of awkward. They do this marriage encounter. They get notebooks and they're supposed to write about how they feel. And it's the first time that I actually relate to Betty because Betty writes in her journal and she shares with Alan that she drinks wine to relax for sex so that she could
Mm,
be more open sexually with him. And I'm like, oh, I understand that because
mhm,
sometimes for myself, I have had a couple glasses of wine so that I could be more vocal about what I want.
mm,
So I related to Betty in that moment. And
yeah.
um, if it was a pattern that I always had to have wine, then I can imagine how, a guy would feel like, oh, you have to have wine to be with me. Like that,
How he would take it that
how
way,
he
but it
would
really was
take
not
it.
the reason she was
Yeah.
doing it. Yeah.
Yeah, so that was this moment where they shared their vulnerability because he shared, obviously didn't share he was having an affair with her friend,
Right.
but he
No, he
shared
left that
everything.
little tidbit out.
Yeah, he didn't write that in his marriage encounter journal.
Interesting.
So they do this marriage encounter, and guess who's babysitting in Love and Death? Miss Candy. Our Miss
Stop.
Candy is babysitting there. So, of course, they show up after having a fantastic experience, and Candy's like, "How was it, Betty?" And Betty's
Oh,
like, "Oh my
stop.
gosh, we're, like, on another level." And yeah, so you can
That
imagine Candy's anger like, "What? You guys
she's like,
actually are connecting?" But she
yeah, and
didn't
she's
portray that.
imagining now they're having sex, and she's like, well, how dare, yeah, okay, so this is getting bad.
Oh
Okay,
my
this
god,
is
isn't it like
leading
one
us
of
down a
those
path.
scenes? It's like one of those scenes like, "Oh, how dare you have sex with your wife? You're cheating on me." I bet that's what
Yes.
she probably felt like as a mistress. Like, "Wait, you're sleeping with your wife now too?"
And
I don't
that's where it
know.
gets so twisted because I do think that sometimes they do feel that way. They feel some ownership over this person. Like, well, you're intimate with me. How dare you cheat on me?
Mhm.
And who knows what the guy, like in these situations, sometimes the guy is telling the mistress, I hate my wife. I never want to have sex with
Oh,
her.
yeah.
Don't worry. We don't even sleep together anyway. It's all about you. And then she would be upset to find out that, oh, in fact, he is sleeping with her. And it just is all, there's a lot, I'm sure, that goes into it. But it sounds like Candy she broke her own boundaries. She said
She
no
did,
feelings, and they tried to call it quits, but it wasn't really quits for Candy in her mind.
despite the receding hairline and lackluster performance. She caught feelings.
This poor guy.
Ironically, on Friday, June 13th, Candy headed over to Betty's home to pick up a swimsuit. Betty didn't beat around the bush, asking Candy whether or not she was having an affair with her husband. So, mind you, they had marriage encounter. They broke it off. It's now months later. This
Okay.
is not days later. This is months later that Betty asked her if she had an affair. After attempting to deny the affair, Candy eventually confessed. Betty disappeared into a room in the house, which was the laundry room in Love and Death, appearing to go collect the swimsuit, but she arrived with an axe.
Now, this is where it gets muddy because did she really arrive with an
Mhm.
axe or is that just Candy's story?
I know, that's what I started thinking too when I was watching Love and Death now knowing. It took everything in my power not to Google this case while I was watching it. Have you done
Yeah.
that? Have you watched
No.
something and then you're
No.
like,
Well,
"I
oh,
need to
yeah.
know the ending?"
Yes, I have
Mhm.
done that and I've spoiled it for myself because I just couldn't help it. But in this situation, I remember thinking, like, this could just be Candy's story that, Oh, it was self-defense because she came at me with an axe, or at least she was holding an axe, which is very threatening, you know? But was she really?
Right. And Candy's the only one to tell the story.
Oh my
So
God. Yeah,
I know.
exactly. Betty can't speak for herself. So what happened after Betty supposedly came out with an axe?
Things ended with Betty Gore being struck over 41 times
Okay,
with the axe.
that's that's a rage killing.
Yeah.
I mean, if it were,
Candy.
I'm sorry, but it
Yeah.
I'm jumping ahead, but it's like if it were, in my mind, if it was self defense, she would have hit her enough times to incapacitate her and then got the F out of there. But it sounds like you took out a lot of shit on Betty.
Yeah, things ended with Betty Gore being struck over 41 times with an axe. First of all, like adrenaline,
Yeah.
adrenaline. So I could play this scene both ways. I could play
Mm.
devil's advocate. I can play both sides. If somebody tries to hit you with an axe and then you're trying to protect yourself and then adrenaline kicks in, then I could see that you want to make it so that
Make
they don't.
absolute sure that they cannot come at you again. And
Correct.
adrenaline kicks in, and you're not really aware of the fact that they're not really moving anymore. So
Mhm.
you just keep going. But then there's the other thing that if this was self-defense, you didn't really want this, but now you're thrust into this situation. Somehow she's able to grab the axe. You would think if it was self-defense, she would hit her enough times to incapacitate her and then get the hell out of there. But
But look at the motivation for Betty. Betty just found out her or just confirmed that her friend, that rage that Betty must have felt. How dare you fucking sleep with my husband?
mhm,
So, I mean, you could go with in Love and Death they paint you can't have him is what she tells Candy. You can't have him.
hmm,
And maybe Betty thinks Candy, you said Candy was an alpha female. Maybe Betty realized Candy was an alpha female and that maybe she thought she was going to steal her husband
mhm,
and therefore was willing to fight
mhm.
literally for her husband
Yeah, literally with an axe. Oh my
and get rid
gosh.
of the affair partner.
All of this for Alan Gore with the receding hairline. I mean, listen,
Well,
she did
that's the
all that.
least of his problems,
Right. Sounds like
according
it.
to everything.
Yeah.
Least of his problems. Candy cleaned herself up and went about her day as normal, leaving Betty dead on the floor and her newborn upstairs sleeping. That
See, now that broke that is absolutely heartbreaking. Now this again really bothers me because if it was self-defense, I think, but again, I'm somebody who's been through a traumatic situation and I reacted in a way that I never thought I would. And people even question me to this day, like, well, why didn't you do this? Why didn't you do that? Because the fact is, when you're confronted with a traumatic situation, you're in shock and you don't know how you're going to react. You might say, oh, I would have done this. You don't know what you would have
you
done.
have no idea.
So I'll
You have
preface
no
this
idea.
exactly by saying that, but it's like if this was self-defense and Betty came at you with the axe and you just killed her, but now you're cleaning up and you're leaving a baby.
Well, let me give like
So I
we
don't
don't
know.
know if the baby was sleeping and Candy knew the baby was sleeping. We don't
Okay. Or if she
fair
knew the
like
baby was there at all.
I don't know. I don't
Okay.
know. But, like, if she
But
did, that's a sociopathic move to leave
to
a
clean
bit.
up and hide it and try to hide it and never tell a soul and leave that body in there to bleed out or whatever, you may have even been able to save her had you just hit her a couple times in self-defense and then been gone once you were safe. Call the authorities and be like, look, she might be dead, please go, she's bleeding. Like, I just am not 100% buying Candy saying that Betty came at her with an axe and that this may have been some sort of self-defense. I'm not, based on her actions afterward, but we'll never truly know.
No.
Sounds like.
So, when this all happened on Friday the 13th,
Mm,
kind of a creepy date that this
mm-hmm.
happened, Alan was away on a business trip. So, remember, Betty doesn't like it when he's away on business. She gets anxious.
Mm-hmm.
Knowing that Betty hated to be alone, he became concerned that she wasn't answering any of his phone calls. He asked his neighbor to knock on the front door to see if Betty was home. When she didn't answer, he called Candy to see if she had heard from his wife. Candy, who had their daughter Alyssa over for a play date, assured him that nothing was wrong. She claimed she last saw Betty when she was picking up Elisa's swimsuit and she was fine. So then Alan made this. So this in Love and Death, it sets the scene that this happened in the morning or like around 10 a.m. ish. And so it's a whole afternoon goes by and he can't get a hold of his wife. And now the scene starts to go to night. Alan made more phone calls and learned that the lights in his house were on and both cars were in the driveway. But Betty wasn't answering the door. Neighbors entered the home several hours after he first suspected something was wrong. And the scene is very eerie because it was a very dark house and you hear a crying baby and then you see all these neighbor men enter the house with flashlights. It was very well art directed. I mean, the scene was a beautiful scene for the scripted part, but obviously terrifying. And you feel the suspense as you know the men are entering the laundry room. The search team found the Gore's infant daughter in her crib and Betty's body in the utility room. She was so bloody that they initially thought she had been shot. After hearing of his wife's death, Alan went to the Montgomery's home to tell them the devastating news and asked them to continue to watch Alyssa for him.
That's
Yeah.
sad. That is
Yeah.
just, it's so eerie. Little did he know that the killer was right there.
So he doesn't even know. At this point, Alan does not know who killed his wife. And they paint it out to be when detectives arrive, they see a newspaper open and it has the ad to go see the movie The Shining.
Mm.
So at first, this Texas town thought this was like a copycat killer inspired by the movie. Do you remember like
Yeah.
those things when people
Y-
think that people act based on what they watch in the movies?
Yes, I do remember the hysteria of like, oh, now there's going to be a bunch of copycats killing everybody in the exact same way. And it was like kind of BS, you know?
Yeah, yeah. Being the last person to see Betty alive, the police immediately suspected Candy. They also found a bloody footprint at the crime scene. The discovery prompted Candy to destroy her summer sandals with a pair of garden shears. So that scene was interesting where she takes her flip-flops and she's cutting them into like tiny little pieces.
So she's still trying to hide this thing. I mean, she's doing
uh
whatever she can to hide this thing. Okay.
Yeah, but they didn't think they had much of a case on her. That was until Alan admitted that he and Candy had ended an affair just 7 months earlier, and the entire story unraveled. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, that's a long pause.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, a
It
long
is.
stop, actually. I mean, that is a long time. That makes me gear to the side of Candy's story that Betty confronted her and it was self-defense because of Betty just learning about this 7 months later would be a devastating blow, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I can only imagine her rage.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think?
I tend to think that Candy still had some feelings and resentment toward him being with Betty and being the alpha that she was. She just kind of like couldn't lose. And I just feel I don't based on Candy's actions afterward, I just think it points to her being the aggressor and not a self-defense thing. I just don't know if I can buy the self-defense thing based on her actions afterward.
That's actually a really good thought because I didn't think about the fact that maybe during these 7 months, we don't know how many times Candy's called and Alan was firm, like, "No, we're really done."
Yeah, you
We
don't
don't know
know.
that. We
Yeah,
don't know if
she
she was
still may have had
pursuing
some
it still.
lingering
Mhm.
stuff, you know.
Good point. She hired Don Crowder, a lawyer she knew from church, to represent her. Aside from leaving the small town of Wiley completely shaken, the case split public opinion. Was it self defense or not? So that's my question, lie detectors. What is your first impression? Is it self defense or not? My impression was since there's nothing noted about that 7 month time frame, I'm sure it would have been in the trial that would follow
Mhm.
that was she trying to reignite that relationship? If it was dead, if it had not nothing was happening during that 7 months, like it truly was over for both of them, then I would lean on the self-defense side. What about you?
I really think based on Candy's actions afterwards, the cleanup, the hiding, the leaving of the baby, leaving the body there and not calling anybody to go check on her to see if there could be a chance to save her or revive her. The number of times she hit her with the axe, to me, lends itself to being rageful. Not it's overkill, and I just think that she was enraged about something. And it could be true. It could be true, maybe, that Betty went and got the axe. I don't think that's true, but it could be true. But it also could just be that she didn't threaten Candy with it, but Betty could have said something smart or something, to Candy that set her off, and she just went off with that axe. I just think the
That's
number
what
of times she
happened.
hit her, yeah.
So,
Mm.
in the trial, a psychiatrist and clinical hypnotist determined that Candy suffered from childhood trauma and that had triggered her rage as an adult. Apparently, what triggered Candy was when Betty shushed her.
Okay. I that's what I'm thinking. Like, that's kind of where my gut is going, that Candy is just somebody who, like, it just something triggered her and she just went off. I don't think she went there intending probably to kill her. Maybe. But that's overkill. And then the cleanup and the afterward. And now there have been cases that I've researched where an innocent person lies because they know that if they tell the truth, it's going to make them look really bad and they're going to catch a lot of heat, even though they didn't do anything wrong. But they're like, you know what? If I just tell this little white lie and say I don't know anything or I wasn't there, then it's not going to, you know what I mean? Like, I'll just save myself a lot of trouble. But then they find out that you were there. And now it's like, oh, you lied. Now you look extra guilty, but you're actually innocent. So Candy could be innocent. Like, she could have cleaned it up and lied about it and hidden it and still be innocent. But I just still think that that's a piece of circumstantial evidence that we have to look at. Gathered, coupled with the fact that she did overkill with the axe 44 times. I just,
Yeah.
those two things lead me to believe that Candy probably was guilty of intentional homicide, but what happened?
So, after a trial that included both a hypnotist and several sympathetic jurors, Candy was acquitted for the crime on the basis of self defense in 1980. It's the stand your ground
Okay.
case.
Oh,
Uh huh.
interesting. So they had a stand your ground law in
Mm
Texas
hmm.
at that time. Oh,
Yep.
interesting. Oh,
Yeah. So now what happened to Candy is that they go to so after the trial, Pat and after the trial, Pat and Candy moved to Georgia
they stayed
and
together.
they stayed together for a very short period of time and
Okay.
then got a divorce. Like what marriage can survive a murder trial?
That's so crazy. I can't even imagine. No.
That would be stressful, especially with the affair
Yeah.
going on. Well, Love and Death, they portrayed her husband finding out Pat about the affair. He felt that he failed his wife, Candy. Like he
Hmm.
felt apologetic to his
Oh, that's
wife.
awful.
I know, I
Yeah, he
know.
took it on himself.
Yeah. So looking this up, today, apparently Candy goes by her maiden name Wheeler, Candy Wheeler, and reportedly went on to become a mental health therapist that works with teens and families. She would be in her 70s today.
So interesting that she got into the mental health therapy field. Like, interesting. But it kind of makes sense though, because it sounds like she may have, and of course I'm not a doctor, had some things going on mentally. And maybe that's what made her interested in diving into that and doing it as a profession and helping others. That's so interesting.
Yeah, I mean, does that change your opinion about who Candy is as a perpetrator or victim?
No, it doesn't. I think it seems like she had good qualities. Like you said, she was a lover of kids and she was, fun and all these things. But she's capable of inflicting emotional and physical damage on somebody. And that's part of who she is. And that makes her different, I think, from the average everyday human being. I don't know. This is such a complicated because nobody was in that house. So, it can't be fully like proven either way. So it's just kind of like beyond a reasonable doubt. But I do find it interesting that she got acquitted because how did they prove this was self-defense? Like, I still think she is most likely guilty of intentional homicide. I don't think it was self-defense. But as far as her getting into the mental health field, does that change who I think she is? I mean, no, but it's fascinating.
It is fascinating. It's completely fascinating because I will say this. I want Candy to be innocent. I want
Yeah.
her to be innocent, and I want to believe it was stand your ground, that she did it in self-defense, and I want to be happy that jurors found that to be true because, I mean, I'm interested to know how many females, when they go into the court, the court system, that are judged based on bias, or
Mm-hmm.
their appearance or whatnot. But I want to believe that this this town got it right. So I'm going to put my rose-colored glasses on, and I'm going to be so happy that Candy is helping others now. But can you imagine the awkward conversation when you
Oh,
watch Love and Death or Candy, and then you
you're like,
realize,
was
"My
that you, doctor? Or
was
whatever
that you,
her.
doctor?
Yeah,
Was
like,
that
was
you,
it
Candy Wheeler?"
that like, wait a minute, you're helping me with my mental health and you axed somebody to death 44 times? Like it's just bizarre. It's like stranger than fiction, right?
Mhm.
But you can't make this shit up. I am just looking at this. All I can look at are what we know went down. There are so many unanswered questions, but I think I know I still, my gut is telling me that she's guilty. And not that she's somebody who is necessarily like a continued danger to society. Like, I think it's very likely she'll never do anything like this again. But I also think there are like crimes of opportunity, or that if just something triggers you the right way at the perfect moment, that you're capable of doing something so heinous that you would probably never do again in your life, because that opportunity where the stars align at the perfectly, in a bad way though, I guess I'm saying, like, the stars
Yeah.
aligned in a very dark way, and I think for Candy, and she was given the opportunity. So she was at Betty's house. Betty likely said something at that very moment, and it just triggered something in Candy, and Candy went psycho on her ass. That's what I think happened, and I don't think that I think that she the stars would have to align again, which is not very likely for her to be capable of doing that again to another person. I don't think that's ever going to happen, but I do think that there was something in her that allowed her to turn a switch on and get very dark.
All right, lie detectors, we want to hear your hot takes on this case. What are your thoughts on Candy? Was it self-defense?
Hey, lie detectors, leave a 5-star rating and drop your favorite lipstick in the review section, because we lie detectors don't gatekeep. And follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Lipstick and Lies if you want to see behind the scenes and clips of us recording each episode, and be a part of the lie detector community. Executive producers of Lipstick and Lies are Melissa Moore, myself, Jamie Rice, and Sim Sarna. The podcast is co-produced by Cloud 10 Media. Subscribe to Lipstick and Lies so you don't miss an episode. We all know that crime is usually a good old boys club, but sometimes the truth lies behind lipstick.